At 19, my mom died of cancer. My dad was killed in a car accident. So this is a crazy time in my life, as you can imagine. And but I've always had the ability to take a bad situation and make it worse. And I did. I made some bad moves and ended up literally homeless before that was even a word. 30-some years ago, nobody was talking about homeless people. That wasn't a term anybody used. But I was sleeping under a pier on the Gulf Coast and in and out of people's garages, which is not safe or smart. But I did. Oh, and let me tell you this, right? Get out your cell phones. Have you got your cell phones? And I don't know if you're supposed to or not supposed to take them of anybody else, but you can do whatever you want with them with me. You can video, you whatever you want to do. You can post it wherever you want. It ain't like anybody's going to come after anybody. But definitely, but get them out, because I want to give you something in a little bit. I'm going to give you a text number that you can use them, but have them out. Okay, so, okay, what was I telling you? Okay, so, all right, so here I am under the pier. I'm living under the pier. And by the way, we still, I still live there. I'm in the town. I'm indoors now, but I live in the town. Orange Beach, Alabama is where I live. And so we live like, I don't know, several miles from the pier. But I drive by that pier that I slept under several times a day when I'm at home. And it's odd, I just tell you, it's kind of odd living in the place where that happened, because I'm their author now. I mean, we live in a little bitty town, it's only 4,000 people, and I'm their author. And so for years we only had a quarterback, but now we've got a quarterback and an author. And so a lot of times people, there are still people there that were there when I've watched these people for years, but a lot of them don't really connect their author with the kid who used to bathe in Holiday Inn swimming pool, okay? And so it's very, very odd to me that sometimes, my wife she's nervous because she knows I'm kind of a smart aleck, and so when we go out to eat, she's afraid I'm going to blow my cover to the wrong person. Because people come up to me in a restaurant and they'll say, "Ooh, I've read your books." And some of them I want to say, "Really? I slept in your garage." So this was a crazy time in my life. But I met this guy. I met this old guy, and his name was Jones. We didn't really know where this guy came from. We didn't know where he went when he left. He'd been in and out of town for years and years. And we didn't know if he had any money. He wore the same clothes all the time, seemed to be clean, but the same clothes. We didn't know what was in that suitcase he carried around. We didn't know how old he was. He's one of those people you look at and go, is he 80 or 180? We weren't really sure. And yet he was the first person in my life to tell me the truth about myself. And when I say that, people go, what's that mean? Well, when you meet somebody having a tough time, what do? We give them $5, or we bake them cookies, or we put them on the prayer list at church. But rarely do we sit down with them and tell them things about themselves that might make them angry at us. Right? And that's what he did. People say something, so really, so he made you mad? Oh yeah, constantly. Because he would say things that had such truth in them that I couldn't avoid them, or I couldn't get away, but it was a huge part of my growth. I think about being here with you today, and I'm very excited to be here, and just have been so honored to hang out with Cindy and Scott and watch a little bit, be a fly on the wall, watch their family, and I want to do great for you. I really want to help, but I got to tell you, I wish you had me 35 years ago. And the reason is because, I mean, I am, what am I? I'm 57 now. I'm 57. And yet, and I don't know what you were like when you were 23, but when I was 23, I knew everything. I mean, I'm much less confident about stuff now, but when I was 23, I knew everything. I mean, believe me, I knew everything. I'm surprised somebody didn't call NASA then and say, "Are you aware we have a kid living on the beach and he knows everything?" I'm surprised, man, because I would interrupt Jones. He'd be talking, I'd say, "Okay, well but let me tell you what I think." And he'd talk about something else, and I'd say, "Okay, but here's one thing I've been thinking." And he'd talk a little bit, and I'd say, "Okay, but here's something you need to think about." And one day he said, Hey, stop. I said, "What?" He said, "You need to be careful with that thinking thing." He said, "Because that'll get you in a lot of trouble." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, most people live their entire lives and never figure out you can't always believe everything you think." It took me a long time to really understand the truth of that. It took me a long time to understand that I could sincerely believe something, and I could be running my life according to that. I could be very sincere in my beliefs, but if it wasn't true, that only made me sincerely wrong. And there was no power in that. And so proof had to do with truth. I had to find the truth about me and about what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to do it. Jones told me one time, he said, most people end up living their lives in a way that is kind of one nothing place to another. It's kind of one thing after another that never really gets anything done. And he said, it's because of a secret they haven't figured out. And I said, what secret is that? He said, it's a secret that in the middle of a crisis, everybody's desperate for answers, and sometimes right in the middle of a crisis, an answer does not yet exist. He said answers can be a matter of timing. He said that people are so desperate for answers that they'll just grab whatever answer they can get and they'll shove that square answer into that round hole. He said that they'll get something. They'll get something. But it won't be what we would call the best. They'll get something. He said, but then they start life from there. And of course, they invariably run into some other crisis, and they need an answer for that one. And they're in the habit now of taking that square answer and ramming it into that round hole. And he said, and life gets kind of farther and farther away from the target we would call the best. And then they end up 40 and 50 and 60, and they have lived their life almost to almost. He said they say things like, I can't believe that the kids are, that we're having this problem, because I thought that they were almost, I can't believe that financially this is where we are. I mean, didn't you think that we were almost, really? We've been married 28 years, and now this? I mean, I thought that we were almost like, and life itself is almost to almost, never hitting the target that would be considered the best. He said, see, the secret is there's something more important than answers right in the middle of a crisis. And that is perspective. Perspective about a situation is thinking that is chosen. You choose to think a certain way about the situation. And it's true. With perspective, we gain calm. Calm leads to clear thinking, and clear thinking yields ideas, and from ideas, we get those answers at the right time. You know, perspective is the only thing that can dramatically change the results and never ever change the facts. Because it's how we choose to think. This was the old man. This is the way he talked to me. He started me reading. You know, I was never a big reader, I guess. I've always been kind of a Sports Illustrated, Field and Stream, outdoor life kind of person, you know. And I never really wanted to read books. But one night he gave me 3 books. And I knew they were biographies. Because they had the names written. That's all it had. There's names written on it. And I hated biographies because they made me read them in school. And I hated them because I saw no point, really. But I knew there were biographies. There were 3. It was Winston Churchill, George Washington Carver, and Will Rogers were the 3 biographies. And I didn't know what to say. He gave them to me. So I said, and I didn't know what to say, so I said, biographies? And he said, no, these are adventure stories. They're thrillers, and romance, and mystery, and they're all true. And I said, oh. He said, yeah, they're from the library. When you get through with them, take them back. Okay, so I started reading. That night I started reading Winston Churchill. Not really because I wanted to. The old man was the only person paying any attention to me at all. And so I didn't really intend to read the whole book. I just wanted to read enough to where when he said, are you reading the books? I could say, oh yeah, I'm reading Churchill now. That's all I really wanted to say. But when I started reading it, I remember that first night reading it, and right near the verses. And so Winston met this little girl, like in kindergarten, named Clementine, and it said that he didn't know it then, but she would one day become his wife. And I remember thinking, there's the romance. But the thing is, the book would like trick me because it would get to the end of the chapter, and every chapter would end with something like, and if Winston had only known what was on the other side of the door, he would have never opened it. And I go, all right, and I'd have to read more to see what was, and I thought, well, there's the mystery. And then then World War II started, and the spies, and I thought, well, there's the thriller. And before I knew it, I'd read the whole book. I read George Washington Carver, and I took the books back, and they said, do you want to get more? And it never occurred to me to get more, but I said, yeah, I guess. Because by this time, it was curious to me that I thought it was interesting. But it was the same biographies I'd always heard, but he had made me think different. There was a different perspective. I had seen the same biography, same facts, but the perspective that it was a thriller and a mystery. I just somehow, and so I ended up reading these biographies, and over the next several years, I read over 200 biographies of these people, these happy people, these influential, financially secure, successful, great people. I was reading books about great people, which when I say that, it makes me think, do they do books of any other kind of people? Because there's not a loser section in Barnes & Noble. But I would read these books trying to think, what is it about these people? How did they turn out this way? Is it something they did? Were they born this way? Because I knew if they were born this way, I was out of luck. But what if it was something they did? What did they do? And how long did it take them to do it? And I ended up identified 7 things. There's 7 things. I didn't even know what to call them at that point. I just called them things. But it was very clear Which, a lot of stuff is clear after you read 200 books, but it's very clear that there were 7 of them. And it was curious to me that it seemed like 2 or 3 or 4 of them were always used. So just like everybody had 2 or 3 or 4 that like they knew they had it and they used them, and then there were 2 or 3 or 4 that you could see with the passage of time that they had these things, but I wasn't sure they knew they had it, right? I mean, you could see all 7 with everybody. I just never found anybody that I thought knew they had all 7 and harnessed all 7. Then I remember thinking, well, what happens to somebody who knows all 7? What happens to that person's life? What happens to somebody who understands all 7 of them and harnesses all 7? What happens to that person? And long story short, those are the 7 things that I started throwing in my life at that point to start yanking myself out of that situation. And years later, they became the 7 decisions, the basis for the Traveler's Gift and the PBS special. That was the basis. But here's the curious thing that I found is that these 7, I call them decisions now, but I didn't know what they were for a while, but I knew what they weren't. I knew that these were not 7 habits. They weren't 7 theories. They weren't even mine, right? I mean, anybody could come up, with these. But it was curious to me as I began to explore them and watch them. It was very obvious that they worked every time. I mean, seriously, they worked every time. When you think about it, when's the last time you had anything in your life that worked every time? And these things worked every time. And they worked every time because there were principles. And principles work every time. Have you ever thought of that? That principles work every time. And principles work whether you know them or not. But the principle of gravity, that was working long before the apple ever fell on Newton's head. But once it did, and once he understood it, we as a society were free to harness that principle to create airline flights, suspension bridges, and any number of things that the principle of gravity holds sway over. Well, principles work every time, yes, but principles work whether you know them or not. But it's like you heard ignorance of the law is no excuse. Well, ignorance of principle is no protection from the consequences of violating that principle just because you didn't know it. I mean, you don't have to know the principle of gravity. You can disagree with it. You can deny it exists. But you stumble off a cliff, it will affect your life, right? Whether you know it or not. And so these principles, I began to understand that a principle that you grab hold of and make your own and intentionally put in your life, that's like a decision. It's a decision. So I started to really learn about these things. And it was very curious to me how we could learn something that would dramatically change our life in the direction in which we intended. And it was also curious to me that principles worked whether I knew them or not. And I realized that there were principles that I had already learned, that I was living my life according to those. I mean, like if you look at some of the principles that you've learned in your life, like you're Matt, I mean, like Matt has whatever the things he has learned in his life, his behavior. Get this, his behavior is governed by principles. Now, if he doesn't actively think this, sometimes it can waver, but for the most part, his behavior is governed by principles. Now, some of the principles that he learned, he might have learned in Sunday school, some from his mom and daddy, some from a teacher, some from a book, but whatever principles that he purposely put in his life, that governs his behavior. And it makes decision-making much more accurate It makes it faster. I mean, it's just like, think about this. I know this is silly, but one of the principles that Matt put in his life years ago was about bank robbery. Okay, that if that ever came up as a possibility, he didn't really have to think about it. Okay, right? I mean, because I could go to Matt and say, Matt, you and me, baby, tomorrow, let's rob a bank, and he's probably not going to say, well, let me talk to my wife about it. I mean, he's probably not going to say, well, I need to pray about that. I mean, he don't need to pray about that. I mean, he already knows what the answer is because he has principles in life that he applies to that. Well, why can't we broaden the territory in which principles govern our behavior, our actions, and our results? And the answer is we can't. Why shouldn't we teach our children how to live lives based on principle, which frankly is a lot easier and more successful life to live than a life where you've got to Google the answer every time a question comes up. So these 7 things, and I want to wheel through them really quickly, but I want you to know that if I were to give you homework, your homework would be to continue to study these 7 decisions, because it's been 15 years since I wrote the book. Since I wrote the Travelers Guide, 15 years since I wrote the book. And I'm still learning stuff about those 7 principles. Today, I'm still going deeper on those. I mean, if I do like a 6-hour, 7 decisions seminar, literally the stuff that I teach on those, the vast majority of the things that I teach is stuff I learned after I wrote the book. Isn't that amazing? So let me wheel through, because I when you hear the 7, if somebody just says them to you, you go, yeah, okay, I know that. But a lot of times we don't know the intricacies, and if we don't know the little twists and turns about these principles, we don't really understand how to harness them completely and have them make the effect in our lives we want. So the first one is first because it's first. People ask me, why did I line them up like I did? Well, no reason except for the first one, because if you don't get this one, the rest of them don't matter. Okay? The first one is responsibility. It's responsibility. And we all hear about it. We've heard about responsibility forever. You can turn on television or read the newspaper. You always hear about responsibility. Sports shows talk about responsibility. But here's the crazy thing. I'm not convinced that most of our people in our society really understand the power of responsibility, because there's 2 distinct extreme edges that everybody talks about when they're talking about responsibility. You got one side going, until these people accept responsibility for where they are, these people will never be able to accomplish. And you got the other side going, but it's not their fault. Don't you understand what his mama was like? And if you had a mama like his mama, right, it's 2 distinct things. But neither side understands the reality or the power of responsibility, because responsibility has nothing to do with blaming people about where they are or making them feel bad about where they're from. Responsibility has to do with hope and control. And who among us doesn't want to have hope for a greater future that we can control? Who doesn't want that? But if you blame your mama, if you blame your spouse, if you blame your neighbors, if you blame the president, if you blame the weather, you blame the economy, there's not a lot of hope there, and there's 0 control. I mean, Matt, if it's my wife's fault, what are we going to do about my wife? I can't control my wife. I don't know about you. What are we going to do? So if it really is her fault, I'm stuck. Okay? People gripe about so many different things. They blame so many. I mean, if where I have ended up in my life really is the fault of the President of the United States of America, I might as well jump off a cliff now. Because what the heck am I going to do about the president, whoever the president happens to be? But if I can look in the mirror and I can say, you know what, I've had some crazy things happen in my life, and I couldn't control any of them. I've had some tragic things happen, but I have made choices in response to these crazy things that have led my life right down a path to a place I don't like. If I can understand and believe that I can make choices that will lead me to a place that I don't like, doesn't it just make logical sense I could also make choices that would lead me to a place I do like? So the game becomes make better choices. That's the game. And that's what the other 6 decisions are about. The second one is seeking wisdom. I will seek wisdom. Now, there's a big difference in wisdom and knowledge, okay? We live in a society where are awash in information, where their knowledge is just everywhere. But wisdom is kind of rare. There's a big difference. You know, people kind of, when you say wisdom, people kind of default to education or knowledge or information. But there's a big difference. It's like a 12-year-old. There's not a 12-year-old any of us know that doesn't have the ability to learn how to drive a car. Physically and mentally, almost every 12-year-old we know could learn to drive a car. Now, if they learn to drive a car, none of us are going to flip them the keys and say, have a great weekend. Because they don't have the wisdom to apply that knowledge consistently on the kind of basis they need to succeed in their lives. Wisdom is different, okay? And so what we're talking about here is something that is hard to put a finger on, but we know where we get it. You know, one of the first places wisdom comes from is by the people we hang with. You know, your mama was right. And here, there's not a mother in this room who isn't desperately concerned with the children or grandchildren that your children or grandchildren hang out with. Isn't that right? Why? Because you know they're going to turn out just like them. You know they're going to have the same issues. They're going to talk the same way. Well, what age does that cease to be a factor in our life?
Never.
21, 32, 55? What age? And you know the answer. We never grow out of that. We walk, we talk, we eat, we vote, we laugh, we even earn like the people we hang with. USA Today did a study several years ago that said you can take your 9 closest friends, add their income together, add your income in with it, divide by 10, and the answer would be within $10,000 of your income. Why? Because we hang out with people that make the same amount of money. It determines what we consider is normal. We look around and we go, okay, well, then I'm fine. Another part of seeking wisdom, and listen, I can talk for an hour on this one, okay? But another part of seeking wisdom is what you listen to, what you watch, and what you read. It is so incredibly important what you listen to and what you watch, because it determines how you think. Listen, I'm begging you. If you are not watching something specifically or listening to something specifically, turn it off. I mean, forget your children. You have no idea what's getting in your heads that you never intended to be there. And you don't believe me? Watch this. Here's the story.
Of a man named Brady.
Just sit right back and hear a tale of I mean, we could do this all night. And there's nobody in this room who ever sat down in front of the television set and said, I'm going to learn the words to this stuff. I mean, we just know it. We don't even know how we know it. But it's there and it's never going away. You know, the reading thing is huge. I get it. I talk to people all the time and say, well, I don't like to read. Yeah, okay. I get that. I totally get that. I think you're wrong, but I get it. Okay? Because I knew that I was that way, and I also know that to this day, it's still something I have to make myself do. It is to make myself read. And it's odd because You say, well, why would you make yourself do something you don't necessarily want to do? Well, I mean, I just know the statistics about reading. Okay, the statistics about reading say that people who read make more money than people who don't read. People who read have a lower divorce rate than people who don't read. People who read have fewer problems with their children than people who don't read. People who read take advantage of opportunities at a higher rate than people who don't read. People who read have people follow them in selected the people who don't. I mean, it's on and on and on. So do you want to read? No. Well, neither do I. Okay? I don't want to read, but I do want to make a better living for my family. I do want to make a better husband for my wife and a better dad for my two boys. I do want to have something to say when I come here. Okay? But do I want to read? No! Well, that's not the point. The point, see, this is discipline. It's discipline. And people have this odd view of discipline. They think discipline is something I don't want to do. Oh, here's something I don't want to do. Look, forget about what you don't want to do. Discipline is about what do you want? What do you want? But see, discipline is, can you make yourself do something you don't necessarily want to do to get a result that you do want to have? Can you make yourself do something for a little while to get a result that you would like to have for the rest of your life? I mean, that's all this is. I mean, most of us, we don't want to go to work, really, but our families have developed these bad habits. They like to eat and sleep indoors, you know? And so, you know, do you necessarily want to do the work in this business? Do you want to? Not necessarily, but you do desperately want the results for your family and for your future. So read. I mean, if people say, I don't like to read. Okay, good. I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I don't like to write. I mean, I'm serious. People say it must be great to just be able to. I don't really like. I mean, I like having books. I like being an author. I like signing books. I like talking about books. I like giving books away on airplanes. I say, oh, you'll like this. My wife loves this author. I love doing that. But do I like to write? No. I like having written. Okay? Do I like writing? No. Every time I sit down in front of the computer, there's only 50 things I can think of I'd rather be doing. What's the result that we're after? Number three, skip that. We'll go back to that. All right, number four is I will have a decided heart. More people fail at what they do because of an undecided heart than for any other reason. You know what an undecided heart is, right? Well, you probably see it. You have somebody, they got a decision to make, and they'll think about it, and they'll talk about it, and they'll talk about it, they'll talk to the family about it, then they'll make the decision. Then they'll take the decision back. And they'll talk to the family about whether they should have took it back or whether they should have stayed with it in the first place. Then they'll talk to their friends about whether they should have stayed with it. Then they'll make the decision again. Then they'll talk to their friends about what their family said. Life becomes this ongoing state of analysis. Look, this is really an easy one. Okay, because in our society today, analysis has become its own industry. You can hire people to analyze. You hire people. You consult with people. And trust me, they will analyze as long as you pay them. I mean, analysis has become its own deal. That's crazy. Because let me tell you something. The purpose of analysis is to come to a conclusion. That's the purpose of it. The purpose of analysis is not to continue to analyze the rest of your life. It's to come to a conclusion and get on with it. People say, well, I want to be sure. You're never going to be sure. Or you can have certainty, but you were not created as a human being with the ability to gather enough facts to make perfect decisions every time. You just can't. Unless you know the future, which, what, the Psychic Network went bankrupt. You'd have thought they'd have seen that coming, right? But you are created with the ability to make a decision and then go about the business of making that right. You know, like, wisdom requires some maneuvering. You're not the same person today that you were a week ago, and you're not going to be the same person next week that you are today. But then those of you who drove here and will drive home when this is over, none of you are going to get in your car and put it in drive and hit the gas and sit back and read a paperback. You know, even though you know where you're going and you know you know generally how you're going to get there, you're also very aware that you're going to run into traffic or roadblocks or something. You're going to have to maneuver. You're going to have to think. You're going to have to get around something and figure out how to do this and get to there. But there's nobody here that would dare treat your trip home like so many people treat their business. Because there's nobody here that would ever get in the car and run into traffic and go, well, I'm just not going home. I'm never going home. I shouldn't have gotten in this car in the first place. I'm just going to stop right here. I mean, are you kidding me? And so what we have to do is be mature and understand that the analysis that we did is real. It's true. Stop listening to stuff that contradicts what you already know is true. It's foolish. Number five. Today I will choose to be happy. Listen, this may be the big money maker for you. It may be the most important part. Because for people that are in business for themselves, today I would choose to be happy is huge. Now look, I don't really believe, happy is probably not a good word, because I don't really believe somebody can go, wow, 5 seconds ago, I chose to be happy. And now I really am! It's stupid, right? But I do believe that people can choose to be grateful. I do believe that we can actively, we can look at our lives and we can find things to be grateful for. Look, we're all either in a crisis, coming out of a crisis, or headed for a crisis. That's part of being with us on this planet. We learn to deal with that. But as bad as things may get, we can quickly go to the bottom line. There's so many things we have to be grateful for. If you ever get to the point that you cannot remember that your family has enough to eat today, that your family has a roof over their head for today, you need to stop and remember there's several billion people on this planet that'll go to bed tonight without eating. And what did we do to deserve being born here, living here? There's so much to be grateful for. Choosing to be happy. Listen, it's a business thing because people do not want to be around unhappy people.
That's right.
I mean, it's shocking to me. I talk to people, and sometimes they go, well, I don't know why. Everybody else can get people to join. Nobody wants to. I've shown my opportunity, and I'm like, oh yeah. I'm just like, can I go home with you? Right? Shoot me now. And so just to understand that people follow happy people. People follow people who know where they're going. And let me give you here's a great skill that you can learn. This is a skill, not a talent. A talent is something you just kind of have, okay? But a skill is something that once you know it and practice it, you can get great at it. Here's a skill. Maybe the most important skill you learned this year. Here it is. You ready? This is more important than A's. It's more important than a college degree. Smile while you talk. Now listen, I didn't say smile a lot. I didn't say greetings day with a big old cheesy grin. What I said was much more subtle and infinitely more powerful. What I said was smile while you talk. Most people don't do this. Most people don't even smile when they're telling a joke. I mean, you watch them. They'll smile and laugh when the punchline comes, and everybody else will smile and laugh, and then they go back to their normal face. But I am urging you to take the next 3 weeks and take 90 seconds a day. Now, you probably hit a bathroom 9 times a day, so take 10 seconds every time you're in the bathroom and talk to yourself in the mirror. Okay? Because I want you to see how you look. Because I want you to look like you want to look. Because I'm not saying to imitate Bozo the Clown. I'm not saying to stretch your lips over your ears. What I'm saying is all I'm saying is to get your countenance up. Get your eyebrows up. Get the corner of your mouth and smile while you talk. Because I'll tell you something. You smile while you talk. I mean, people can't help it. I mean, they can't help it. And then you get good at it. And you start throwing this one in. You know what I'm saying? They're not. I mean, look at them. They don't know why they're not. Is just massive. Now, I used to think that forgiveness was like this knighthood I would bestow upon some lucky person that came dragging their sorry butts into my presence and begging me to forgive them and cry. Then maybe I'd forgive them if I felt like it. But 30 years of researching this, I can't find any expert or a single book, including the Bible, to tell me for one person to forgive another person that this person actually has to deserve it, or ask for it, or even know that it's happening. Now, I'm not talking about being forgiven. That's a spiritual touchstone for many of us. I'm talking about what is it that is in our control when we're laying awake at night, thinking about that lady and what she said, and what you said, and what you would have said if you hadn't had to think about it, and what you will have said the next time you run into her. I mean, these people are across town sleeping peacefully, unaware we're even been out of shape. And so whose life is it screwing up? Whose relationships is it ruining? It's us, it ain't them. You see, forgiveness is a decision. It's not an emotion. We treat it like an emotion, which is why it drags us around like a dog on a leash. But if you remember Psychology 101, it says that emotions follow decisions. See, forgiveness is a decision. You can decide to forgive. You may have to decide it again. You may have to do it again and again, or 7 times, 70 times. But eventually that emotion will follow behind that decision. Sometimes people say, what, so they're just going to get away with it? And I'm like, no. I mean, nobody's getting away with anything, because don't mistake forgiveness and trust. It's 2 different things. Forgiveness is about us. Trust is about them. Forgiveness is about the past. It's about us not being burdened by the past. It's about us not letting our history control our destiny. Forgiveness is about the past. Trust is about the future. Do you forgive somebody who steals from you? Yeah. Do you continue to do business with them? Probably not. Do you forgive somebody who lies to you? Yeah. Do you continue to believe everything they say? No. It's 2 different things. Incidentally, there's one person most of us need to forgive,
Ourselves.
and that's ourselves. I mean, I don't know about you, but me, all the people who have offended me in my life, nobody has come close to disappointing me as much as I have disappointed me. And I couldn't even lie about it. I knew everything I'd done. And I want to tell you something. You know, we think that doesn't show. Oh man. This is a big one. You know, fortunately, you can actually get alone by yourself and decide to lay down the whip and the stick you've been beating yourself over the back and neck and shoulders with. Forgive yourself and move on. I mean, especially if you have been forgiven, to forgive yourself. See, sometimes people think that's not important. Let me tell you something. It's tough to find an enemy that has a fort in your head. And people think, sometimes they think it doesn't matter, or that it doesn't show, or that they hide it well. It's just not true. I'm telling you, it's just like a dog can sense fear in people. People can sense bitterness in other people. And they don't always know what they're sensing. But I'm going to tell you something. They don't do business with it. They don't join in a mission. They don't stay married to it forever. You can forgive yourself and wash it all away. Number seven is I will persist without exception. Most people think they've heard this, but what they've heard is I will persist. Without exception is a different deal. See, when you persist without exception, that means you have to find a way where there is no way. What is that? Well, I mean, we all come with everything we do. We all come to places that we hit a wall and we go, that's the end. There's just no way. There's no way. Okay, well, in our society today, there's no penalty for quitting anymore. You can quit anything you want to quit. Especially if you've persisted and you tried. You tried. I mean, good grief, you tried. If anybody could have done it, you could. I mean, God knows you tried. And see, you don't worry about it. You quit with clear conscience. But see, that's just if you persisted. But if you decide to abide by the principle of persisting without exception, that means that even when there seems to be no way, well, now you have to find a way where there is no way. So what does that look like? I'll tell you what it doesn't look like. When people get in that situation, they blame time is slow, we're out of time. I mean, there's no way with what's left on the calendar. Or they blame money. We don't have any money. I mean, my God, if we had some money. Or they blame leadership. It wasn't our fault in the first place. If we had the right leaders, then we could probably, if I had their leaders, then we could probably, let me tell you something. You are never, it may look like it may just be a little symptom, but you are never lacking time, never lacking money, and never lacking leadership. Because all those things can be gathered very easily with the one thing that you are lacking at that moment, and that is an idea. One idea changes everything. One idea changes everything. And people say, well, how do I get the idea? Listen, you and I both know, we've seen people make billions of dollars with an idea. We've seen millions of lives saved with an idea. And one idea will move you from where you are to where you want to be. It's one idea about what you need to learn. It's one idea about what you need to become. It's one idea about an action you need to take. Listen, you know what most people do when they don't know what to do, right? Nothing. That's what they do. When they don't know what to do, nothing. What are you doing? Well, really, nothing right now. Why are you not doing anything? Well, frankly, we just don't know what to do. What? So you're doing nothing. We don't know what to do. Let me tell you something. Nothing's never the answer. Okay? And the quality, you're talking about wisdom here, the quality of your answers will always be determined by the quality of your questions. You want good answers in your life? Ask good questions. Questions that lead to something. I mean, I have a couple of silly questions that get me moving. Here's one. I mean, because I run into times I don't know what to do. All right? And I'm just as tempted as anybody else to do nothing at those times. Here's my question. Andy, I know you don't know what to do, but if you didn't know what to do, what would you do right now? Right? I mean, I know you don't know who to call. But if you did know who to call, who would you call right now? Listen, all you're lacking is an idea. Ideas sometimes can be a pattern determined by adrenaline. And adrenaline comes from movement. Don't ever let me find you people ever, anywhere, in an airport. Don't any of you ever come up to me and say, we saw you in Columbus and you said that all we needed was an idea. And we tried to have an idea, but all the ideas were taken. Don't do that. Right? I haven't slapped anybody yet, but I've come very close. If you ever get to thinking that there's not an idea left, I want you to remember there's always ideas. Good grief, we put men on the moon before anybody thought to put wheels on luggage. Always ideas. Okay, listen. Go back to the third one. Go back to the third one. Oh, let me tell you this real quick. You got your phone? I want you to text something. Ready? Text it. Hey, I'm going to give you a text number. You ready? This doesn't sound like a text number, it's 5 digits, but this is a text number to me. All right? It's 33444. 33444. And I want you to put in the message one word, inspired. INSPIRED. And if you text me that, I will come back, my office will come back to you and get you a link to a 5-day entrepreneurial course that I did for you. Okay?
Woo!
It's free, absolutely free. And so, I want to help you with your business. So 33444 and the word inspired. That's all you text. And my office will come back to you and get you the link to that. Okay, so here's the last thing. The last thing, number 3, is action. Do something. It seems obvious, but boy, sometimes that absolute definite move eludes us. But action, you can know all this stuff and not do something and nothing happens. You know, God feeds the birds, yes, but He doesn't throw the worms in their nest. Okay? You gotta do something. Now, one of the things that you've been hearing about is the butterfly effect. You heard of it, right? The butterfly effect was a doctoral thesis written in 1963 by Edward Lorenz, and it was presented to the New York Academy of Sciences and laughed out of the place. It was crazy. The butterfly effect stated a butterfly could flap its wings on one side of the world and set molecules of air in motion that somewhere along the line could actually create weather patterns on the other side of the world. It was ridiculous, but it was interesting. And because it was interesting, it hung around in myth and urban legend and comic books and bad movies until finally, physics professors proved that the butterfly effect was accurate and viable and worked every time. And not just with butterflies, but with any form of moving matter, including people. They gave it the status of a law, just like the law of gravity. The butterfly effect is now known as the law of sensitive dependence upon initial conditions. And it works every time. Now, in a real-world example, your life shows the butterfly effect. Everything you do matters forever. Not just to you or your family or your hometown. Everything you do matters for all of us and for all time. And curiously, everything you don't do matters too. It spins the world in a different direction. I was watching, just kind of keep my eye on television in a hotel room several years ago. I was ironing the left sleeve of a white shirt, and ABC News was on. They're giving this Person of the Week thing. They do this every Friday night still. And they'll talk about somebody, how great they are, giving the Person of the Week award. I'm barely listening, and the guy says, and so the Person of the Week, and they give the statistics and calculate what he's done, and say, is Norman Borlaug. Oh man, when he said Norman Borlaug, I put the iron down. I ran over in front of the TV set. My jaw's around my knees. I didn't know the dude was still alive, but he died, 96 when he died in Dallas several years ago. But he in the 1940s, he had hybridized corn and wheat for arid climates, and they had determined that his work throughout the world, through the decades, had saved the lives of 2 billion people from famine. The guy saved 2 billion lives. And for that, he was Person of the Week. Now I'm sitting there yelling at the TV because I know it was really Henry Wallace who had done it all. Henry Wallace was Vice President of the United States under Roosevelt, one of three Roosevelt had, all right? And Henry Wallace was the former Secretary of Agriculture. And while he was Vice President of the United States, he used the power of his office to create a station in Mexico whose sole purpose was to figure out how to hybridize corn and wheat for arid climates. And he hired a young man named Norman Borlaug to run it. And Borlaug got the Nobel Prize. But Henry Wallace was really the one who saved the 2 billion people. Unless maybe it was George Washington Carver. You remember Carver, don't you? The peanut stuff? See, here's one thing people don't know about Carver. When he was 19, student at Iowa State University, he had a dairy sciences professor who on Saturday and Sunday afternoon let him babysit his 6-year-old boy. And it was George Washington Carver that took that 6-year-old and put a vision in his life about plants and what they could do for humanity. George Washington Carver took that 6-year-old Henry Wallace long before he ever thought about being Vice President of the United States and turned him in a direction. I mean, it's amazing to think of George Washington Carver flapping his butterfly wings for years with the peanut. 266 things he developed from the peanut that we still use today. And while nobody was looking, he spent a couple of weekends with a little boy and flapped his wings with this 6-year-old and just happened to save the lives of 2 billion people and counting. So you think, well, then it was Carver who saved the 2 billion people. No. Maybe it was the farmer from Diamond, Missouri. A man named Moses lived in a slave state, didn't believe in slavery. So this was a problem for these psychopaths like Quantrill's raiders who would come through farms and villages at night, burning and destroying. One night, Quantrill's raiders came through Moses' farm and they burned the barn and they shot several people and they drug off a lady named Mary Washington who refused to let go of her infant son, George. Now, Moses is probably like me, just crazy and disorganized, but he had a wife named Susan who was very organized, and she sent word out and messengers desperately trying to create a meeting with Quantrill's raiders to get Mary and that baby back. And 48 hours later, she had that meeting set. And she sent Moses to a crossroads in Kansas on a black horse, where at the appointed time, he met 4 of Quantrill's raiders who showed up on horseback, carrying torches, the flour sacks over their head, the eye holes cut out. And there, Moses traded the last horse they had left on that farm for what they threw him in a burlap sack. And as he caught it, and they thundered off, he went to the ground, and there, in that darkness with that breath coming out against that black night, he pulled out of that burlap sack, this cold, naked, almost dead baby boy, and he jerked open his coat and his shirts, and he put the baby in next to his skin, and he covered him up, and he walked that baby out and all the way home. And the next afternoon, when he stumbled through the front door and put that baby in the arms of his wife, they went to the fireplace and began to massage that baby, his arms and legs, trying to get the circulation going. And they promised God that they would raise that baby as their own if he just let him live. They told that baby right then they would educate him to honor his mother, who they knew was already dead. And that was the moment they told that baby they would give him their name. And that's how Moses and Susan Carver came to raise that little baby George Washington. So when you think about it, maybe it was a farmer's wife from Diamond, Missouri who saved 2 billion people. Unless. See, we could do this all night. How far back could we go to show whose move at what time really was the move? This saved 2 billion people, the number that continues to increase while we sit here. How far back could we go? And how far forward could we go in your life? How far forward could we go to show the difference you will make by the actions that you take or don't take? How far forward could we go? You understand, right? There's generations yet unborn whose very lives will be shifted and shaped by what you do tonight and tomorrow and the next day and the next, because everything you do matters. Not just for you or 31 or your hometown or your your family, everything that matters to all of us and for all time. Don't forget it. Thank you.